we had 90 minutes of restricted talks between Prime Minister and Premier Lee. About half an hour, maybe a shade more of delegation level talks, and then there was an event to do with the leaders of provinces and mayors, leaders of regions. 24 agreements were signed, and we released a joint statement. I think most of you would have seen the joint statement. Most of you would be familiar with the agreements. Now, if I were to broadly describe the approach of the two sides to this visit and the discussions which took place, I think the approach was of two major powers dealing with each other, two major powers in the region and in the world. And we've actually, in China, there is a tradition of using certain phrases to connote the nature of the relationship. So you will see this referred to in the joint statement, that India and China, it talks of the re-emergence of India and China as two major powers in the region and the world. And who will be dealing with each other with mutual respect and sensitivity, and who will be taking into account each other's concerns, interests and aspirations. In terms of the relationship again, and this is a very careful choice of words, it is a constructive model of relationship. And what you see in the joint statement is this two major powers dealing with each other in a constructive way, now expressing that in bilateral relations, on regional issues and on global issues. Two words that came up very often in the conversation, both yesterday and today, were strategic communication and strategic coordination. Again, I put those two words in the context of the two major powers. Now, what I'd like to do is to walk you through clusters of issues, so that the joint statement has a certain flow, but perhaps this reflects the nature of the discussions a little more accurately. I think there was an overall sense that we needed to move on the outstanding issues, but we also needed to develop a more positive narrative of our relationship and to build higher levels of trust. If I can sort of give you again a flavor of the conversation, Prime Minister Modi, for example, said that when it comes to our relationship, there's no question of going back, but standing still was also not an option, and the only way was to move forward. Similarly, today, Premier Lee spoke of the image of our relationship in the past being of adversaries and competitors, and why today we need to credibly project a positive partnership. That sense that today the relationship is poised at a very important juncture where there are possibilities of moving forward, again was felt yesterday by President Xi, who actually quoted Chairman Mao about 10,000 years being too long, and he said, "Seize the day, seize the hour." So there is that sense on both sides at the leadership level that it is possible for the two countries to do more, that the opportunities are there. Yes, we have issues and we must address those issues, but that should not lead us to neglect the possibilities and the opportunities we have. Now, in terms of the bilateral political, security, defense cluster of issues, there was a fair amount of discussion on the border and on strengthening peace and tranquility on the border. There was an agreement that we should expand the number of border BPMs, the border personnel meeting points. At the moment, we have 4 BPMs in operation. One in Bumla in the eastern sector, in Nathula in the Sikkim sector, Chushul in the western sector, and Kibutu Damai, which was opened recently, in the eastern sector. So we'll be looking in the near future to expand the number of BPMs. There was also a sense that the frequency and the context in which these meetings took place could be increased, expanded, that both sides would work to implement existing agreements, and that the leaderships will pay close attention to the border situation. On the defense side, again, there was a agreement that there should be more exchanges and interactions, and the Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission would be visiting India. Raksha Mantri has been invited to visit China. And there was an initiative that in our military-to-military cooperation, we should focus on HADR, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. So we would be discussing the possibility that between the two militaries now this becomes a subject for a joint activity or an exercise. There's also an agreement to activate hotline between the military headquarters of the two countries. In terms of the political level visits, an important visit that we are expecting soon is from the Chairman of the National People's Congress, Keqiang, whom Prime Minister will be meeting soon. So that was the incoming political visit that we are looking at immediately. Moving on, counter-terrorism featured strongly. I think I shared with some of you yesterday that Kabul and Karachi came up in the conversation. So again, the sense that this was a shared threat for both countries and that we needed to work more closely. A new element this time in the visit was the leaders of the regions. So we've created a forum for leaders of regions. The first meeting of that forum took place. As many of you are aware, some chief ministers and mayors are here. And this is in keeping with the government's emphasis on cooperative federalism. Another important development was that we institutionalized a practice between the International Department of the Communist Party and the Ministry of External Affairs. We used to organize visits of chief ministers and party leaders, provincial party leaders. In fact, Prime Minister himself came to China on one of those invitations. So we today signed an agreement. We signed agreement for a sister state relationship to sister city relationships. So as you can see, the federal, provincial, regional aspect of our cooperation is gathering ground. We also agreed to open an additional consulate. The Chinese will do so in Chennai, we will do so in Chengdu. Again, that reflects the sort of a more intense, a more broad-based relationship which requires more servicing in a sense on both sides. That broadly was the political defense security side. On the economic side, and we now use this term close developmental partnership, I think the most important takeaway today was an agreement that we would set up a high-powered task force which will look at economic issues, which will look at the trade deficit, look at IT issues, look at pharma issues, agriculture issues, manufacturing issues. There was a fair amount of discussion on what the problems were, what could be done. It was a fairly specific discussion in some cases. Some of it took place yesterday with President Xi. Some of it in greater detail took place today with Premier Li. We are also in the context, I would flag, we would be the partner country, the guest of honor at the China South Asia Expo this year in Kunming. There was some discussion on in the investment climate and ease of doing business, and review of the proposals to establish industrial parks in India. One is in Maharashtra, one is in Gujarat. An agreement was signed in skills development with institution in Gujarat. There was a smart city exchange. We'll be doing exchanges of pilot projects. Urbanization, how the Chinese have handled urbanization, what are their lessons, experiences there which we could pick up. And there was a fair amount of discussion on connectivity. in particular on the AIIB and BCIM corridor, which had been agreed to some years ago. Trans-border issues also came up for discussion. The trans-border reverse was discussed. We appreciated the Chinese, the information data that the Chinese give to us, and there was an understanding that we would be extending the agreements which are now due to be renewed, and I would say perhaps we need a little more deliberation on where we could take this forward. We also, Prime Minister expressed his appreciation of the fact that the commitment to open a second route on the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra was very speedily fulfilled. It will be happening next month. Now, returning to the theme of two major powers, obviously there was a fair amount of talk was devoted to global issues, and again the broad sense of it, and I use a term which actually both Chinese leaders used, which is a more equitable global order. I think from our side it is also a more contemporary global order. And here I'll just flag your attention to some of the developments. One, you would note that there's a separate statement on climate change. We have a history of cooperation here. We have a grouping called BASIC. India and China are particularly close in this, given the fact that we have the Paris meeting coming up. So our being in touch, working together on this is important. Two, we've set up a mechanism to discuss WTO issues, because there again, this is an area where we have both strong interest and positions, and we need to coordinate where those interests converge. On UNSC, the joint statement reflects the Chinese support for India's aspirations. On APEC, China welcomed India's desire to strengthen links with APEC. On the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, whose summit level meeting would be coming up in July, China welcomed India's application for full membership. And on the NSG, China also took note of our aspirations. I think that was for the first time it's reflected in a document. So that broadly is the sort of sum of what was discussed and what has found a reflection in the expression in the outcome document. And if you have any questions, I'd be delighted to answer.
Nidhi.
Sir, it was widely expected that the e-visas would be announced on this visit. Why didn't that happen? Were there security concerns back home?
Well, I don't know about widely expect. I mean, you might have reported it, but we have to decide it. And the fact is, extending the there were an initial list of countries for whom the e-visa scheme was applied, and then we are expanding it bit by bit. And I think in regard to China, so far no decision has been made.
Yes, Smita Sharma.
So, even when Mr. Narendra Modi said that there has to be on the line of actual control clarification, what is the sense that you get from the Chinese really? Is there an unwillingness to move forward? Is there a resorting to status quo? Why isn't the sense of urgency coming in from the Chinese side as well?
Well, normally on border discussions we don't go into details, but I think the Prime Minister's own statement to the press today reflected the fact that we felt that the early LAC clarification would help to strengthen peace and tranquility on the border and take the border settlement issue forward. Obviously, their view is not fully in accordance with ours, which is why matters are where they are. But this matter was discussed.
Just adding to that question, was there any response from the Chinese side to this when we spoke about the clarification bit?
I can only say the issue was discussed. The relevance of LAC clarification was brought out, and there was a fairly healthy discussion on this issue.
Shalini.
Thank you very much. On the economic issues, you talked about the trade deficit issue being addressed and a high-powered task force being set up to address some of those issues. But has there been any forward movement or any willingness to address the access issues that Indian companies, whether it's pharmaceutical or IT companies, have constantly been putting on the table, specifically to do with state-owned enterprises in China giving access to Indian IT companies? Has there been any forward movement on that front?
Well, you see, I think the reason why why it was agreed that we would set up a high-powered committee was a sense that there wasn't enough movement on this issue. So if there had been movement, we wouldn't need a high-powered committee. So this is an area where actually we have a position which has been explained in some detail. The bureaucracies have been in touch with each other. It is not that the Chinese side is in denial about this or says that there isn't a legitimate issue out here. I think the challenge for us is when you see a problem, one side has proposed certain ways of how you could do this, but it isn't getting done, or it isn't getting done adequately enough, and that's really why we need that high-level committee.
Rahul?
Foreign Secretary, there was talk about a possible agreement where the Chinese side would share in real time actual river data, river flow, water flow data to India. Where are we on getting real time data from the Chinese side?
Well, I know that we get data. I've actually, when I went to Tibet some years ago, I actually saw the station on the Sutlej, which I think generates this. But I am not very sure about the real-time part of it. I must confess, I don't want to mislead you, so I don't want to tell you it's yes or a no. But my sense is that there is a time lag here. But I don't think that's the issue with the data. I think the issue with the data is the periodic, the number of days for which the data is made available, because it is given in flood season, and their sense of flood season is different from our sense of flood season. So I think those are some of the gaps which we would like to plug early on.
So this is Anjana from Aaj Tak.
Sure.
You talked about how terrorism was a concern that both of you talked about. बल्कि मैं चाहूंगी आप हिंदी में इसका जवाब दें. आतंकवाद एक ऐसा मुद्दा जो शायद दोनों देशों के लिए एक बहुत बड़ी चिंता का सबब है इस वक्त. उसका जिक्र आपने किया और कहा कराची काबुल दोनों का जिक्र आया. बातचीत में चीन का आतंकवाद के बारे में उसकी समझ और सोच के बारे में क्या समझ पाया, और इसी के साथ इस बातचीत के जरिए क्या इस पूरे इलाके में, इस पूरे एरिया में आतंकवाद के खिलाफ जो मुहिम छेड़ी है उसमें पाकिस्तान की पोजीशनिंग, इंडिया की पोजीशनिंग, चीन की पोजीशनिंग, तमाम मुद्दों पर इस पर कुछ बातचीत हुई?
नहीं, देखिए, ऐसा है कि आतंकवाद हमारे लिए तो बहुत बड़ी बात है, और हम लोग काफी सालों से हम लोग जो हैं इस पे हमारी फोकस है. उन्होंने भी, उनके नेताओं ने भी कहा कि उनके लिए भी बड़ी चिंता है. तो पर अब डिस्कशंस में बात तो हुई कि अब अगर दोनों के असेसमेंट एक ही पेज पर हैं तो इसको कैसे आगे बढ़ाया जाए. हम लोग जो हैं मिलिट्री लेवल पे एक्सरसाइज करते हैं, काउंटर टेररिज्म एक्सरसाइज करते हैं, पर वो एक माने ऑपरेशनल लेवल है कि स्ट्रेटेजिकली इसको आपस में क्या करना चाहिए, क्या ज्यादा करना चाहिए, इस बातों पर डिस्कशन थी. The CCIT, the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, that also came up for discussion.
सर, पीओके में चीन के इन्वेस्टमेंट को लेकर भारत में बहुत सारे सवाल उठ रहे हैं, क्या इसका कहीं जिक्र हुआ?
The issue did come up.
Sir, I'm Abhishek from Times Now. Did the Indian side ask the Chinese to put a time frame to the boundary talks that have been going on, and if yes, what was the Chinese response? And part B of the question is, there is an MOU today between Prasar Bharati and CCTV would they exchange maps of how India should be seen and how China should be seen?
On the first question, that putting a timeline, no. My sense is that that's not the way this is not a problem where you put a deadline and say let's try to resolve it by that. I think the problem is too complex and too serious to contemplate that. As far as your second question is concerned, I saw the agreement. I think it will be in public domain. I'm sure you can see that for yourself.
Geeta Mohan.
So I have the same question on
If you have the same question, you don't need an answer.
So you spoke about Kabul and Karachi attacks and the fact that terrorism was discussed between the two countries. Did India specifically raise the issue of terrorism emanating from Pakistani soil and the fact that China and Pakistan share great relations? Will China really send that message out to Pakistan, or I don't know whether I should be using the word, rein Pakistan in ensuring that homegrown terror from Pakistan stops?
Look, I'm trying to give you a sense of the discussion. It's normally not done for people to give you a line-by-line readout of conversations. So as a sense of a discussion, I can share with you that, yes, the issue of terrorism came up. Yes, we had concerns, which all of you are well aware of. The Chinese also had concerns. They spoke about it as well. Now, if we and the Chinese are discussing terrorism, I mean, most issues have a context and a real life sense to it. So I don't think you need to test your imagination too much in that regard. I think that's really as much as I can fairly say in public.
Kaushik.
Sir, you spoke about activating hotline between army headquarters between the two armies. You mean that the GMO's hotline? And if yes, what would be the time frame of this activating the hotline? Second, hotlines were also being discussed between Northern Area Commander and the counterpart, and Eastern Area Commander and the counterpart. What is the decision on that? Third, China is reluctant to host our Northern Army Commander. He was denied visa 5 years ago. Is there an agreement now that they will be hosting a Northern Area Commander?
My first answer, my answer to your first question, is that the agreement is to have hotlines between the military headquarters. Exactly at what level of the military headquarters, I think needs to be worked out. But the important thing is it is between military headquarters. We do not have an understanding on hotlines at the command level. I think it will happen fairly soon, because given the focus there was, the importance which was attached to maintaining peace and tranquility, the fact that there was enthusiasm on both sides to have more border personnel meetings. So you can see that the desire to avoid any untoward incidents is very strong on both sides. So if you take that as reflecting a sense of priority and urgency, I would imagine the hotline would come about sooner rather than later, but we didn't put a specific date and a time to it. On the Northern Command issue, I think there was a time when there was some hesitation on the Chinese side for some inexplicable reason on accepting visits from Northern Command. That got sorted out some years ago, in fact quite some years ago. So I'm not very sure that it is a live issue anymore.
Sir, this section, Ashish from ABP News. Sir, एक तो मैं जानना चाहता हूँ सर, ये जो बुलेट ट्रेन्स को लेकर फिजिबिलिटी स्टडी का करार हुआ है सर, ये क्या सिर्फ गुजरात और महाराष्ट्र तक रेस्ट्रिक्टेड रहेगा या उसके बियॉन्ड भी रहेगा? एक दूसरा सवाल मेरा सर ये कि आपने सुना होगा आपके पाकिस्तानी काउंटर पार्ट ने कैसे हमें ब्लेम किया है इंडियन एजेंसी को कराची के अटैक के लिए, उस पर भी अगर आप पहले रिस्पॉन्ड करें।
हाँ, नहीं, जैसे मुझे याद है ये जो फिजिबिलिटी स्टडी जो हाई स्पीड का जो है ये दिल्ली नागपुर सेक्शन का है। और वो आपका जो दूसरा सवाल जो है ये मीटिंग जो है चीन के बारे में है, तो चीन के अलावा कुछ और प्रश्न है तो आप मुझे दिल्ली में पूछेगा।
I wanted to know, you mentioned about connectivity and BCIM. One, a little bit of detail if you can share. And second, from the Chinese perspective, they see the BCIM as a construct of the Belt and Road Initiative. Do we look at it as a separate entity, or do we look at it in that framework? And second thing, a short one on Nepal. You mentioned about humanitarian issues developing and possibilities of cooperation. I'm looking at a post-humanitarian phase when it comes to reconstruction phase. Is there a possibility of India and China cooperating at that level, in that framework? Thank you.
Well, you see, in case of the BCIM corridor, my recollection is that our understanding to work together on this corridor predates this One Belt, One Road. So now whether someone thereafter moves it from this file to that file is their internal business. As far as we are concerned, we have a commitment which, if my memory serves me right, we made when Premier Keqiang went to India. And there is a joint study group. The joint study group has held meetings. My sense of it is that it is moving and moving positively. On the Nepal and HADR, disaster relief issue, the idea that we and the Chinese could do something on disaster relief was a larger issue. It isn't only Nepal. I mean, if you look at the last few months, we've had numerous instances where disaster relief situations have happened. And considering the fact that both countries have growing capabilities, it makes sense today that at least in Asia, if countries with capabilities in Asia work together, it's something which when you speak of an Asian century, I mean, these are little things which would create cooperation among Asian countries. Insofar as Nepal is concerned, I think what you are saying perhaps is not the right way to look at that situation. I think the important thing in Nepal is that we all coordinate with the government of Nepal. I mean, they are the people who are anchoring this issue and with whom all of us need to be in touch. How the government of Nepal wants its international partners to work out is something which we will see in due course.
Last three questions, Keqiang.
One more from PTI. Ahead of PM's visit here, China has vocally came out with maritime cooperation, especially with regard to Silk Road projects as well as our monsoon projects, in order to reduce friction between the two countries. They've also proposed trilaterals with Sri Lanka and as well as Nepal on strategic coordination between the two countries. Have they flagged these issues? Have these things been discussed?
No. There are a lot of things which come out in the Chinese media. I'm not sure that you should necessarily take them to be government proposals. So I think some of what you've suggested, I read the same newspapers as you do, but I'm not sure that these have these reflect authoritative official positions. There was some discussion on, obviously there was a lot of discussion on connectivity related issues and, a little bit less so on maritime issues, but nothing in the direction which you would tend to suggest.
Zakir.
On the One Belt, One Road, can you articulate for us what India's concerns are and why isn't there a contradiction between us being one of the founder members of the Asian Investment Infrastructure Bank, whose one of the sole aims is to fund these OBOR projects? Why are we sitting this out?
I think the answer to your second question is a no.
We're not.
No, there's no contradiction. The answer to your first question is, look, the One Belt, One Road is a Chinese initiative. It's a national initiative of a country. If any country wants other countries to discuss and collaborate on national initiatives. It is for the country which takes the initiative to take an initiative to discuss that initiative. We are open to discussing this with the Chinese whenever they wish to discuss it.
But they haven't put that proposal forth either today or in the last.
We have not had a detailed, structured discussion with the Chinese on One Belt, One Road.
Swasni.
Madam Secretary, you have a separate joint statement on climate change between India and China, which seems a little out of place given that the US and China have already signed their agreement and China has already indicated it will stick to its emission limits. Did China ask us to adhere to any emission dates, any deadlines on that? You also have point 8 in your joint statement on climate change, which talks about China and India will announce their INDC figures as well. Is there a date for that? Is India and China going to do that together? If you can just throw some light on why this separate joint statement on climate change and what it achieves now that US and China have already signed a much bigger climate change agreement.
No, look, first of all, I'm not sure I necessarily accept some of the comparisons you are making, that, they have done this and we have done this and that is bigger and this is smaller. I'll kind of bracket that and put that away. I think the issue is a fairly straightforward one, which is it is a issue on which we have a history of cooperation, we have a history of communication, we have worked together in these negotiations closely, and these negotiations are coming up at coming to head at the end of this year in Paris. So it makes perfect sense for two countries which have a strong common interest, which have a history of working together, to express in some public way that they remain committed to working together in this regard, that their interests still largely converge on this issue. So I think that was the intent with which we came to this. In terms of how much, this was discussed in a broad way, and in a broad way because frankly, there was so much agreement on it, it didn't merit a more detailed discussion. In terms of coordinating on the INDC, I am not aware that it would, that is contemplated. No, it is, no, they will, I mean, in a sense, these are parallel processes. I mean, what it says is we are fully engaged in our domestic preparations on INDCs, and will communicate the INDCs as early as possible and well before the, it doesn't say we'll communicate it simultaneously together in a coordinated manner.
This is Tamanna from CNBC Awas. It's a two-part question, sir. Last September, there was a commitment of a $20 billion investment in India over 5 years. Has that moved forward in any concrete way this time? And the second part of the question is that this task force on the trade imbalance, does it have a timeline or a specific goal?
Well, I think on the investment, what you'll have to wait for that story to unfold in Shanghai tomorrow, because there is a business event, there will be business agreements signed. And since we are predominantly market economy, a lot of this is actually done with private sector in India. Definitely, I would put it this way, that we can see more visible enthusiasm among Chinese businesses to invest in India. This interest to invest in India was also expressed by Chinese leaders at different points of time in their meetings with us. How that interest translates into business agreements obviously will depend on people on our side, people on their side. Our sense is some of it is translating, and you will see the results of that tomorrow. We are also objective enough to recognize that we need to keep improving the ease of doing business in India. And that is something on which we have a very open mind, and if there are concerns which are expressed tomorrow during the business event in that respect, it's something which we will listen to with a great deal of respect and open-mindedness. on your, is there a timeline on that joint task force? No, because look, the proposal was made only, the whole thing materialized only this morning. That in the course of the discussion, recognizing the fact that we had not made enough headway, a sense was, look, we need to do something about it. So I think it's up to us now in the next few weeks to sit down, work it out, and decide, what will the task force comprise of, what would be the agenda, how does it go forward. Those things we will work on.
Very last question, Shubhaji.
Sir, Shubhaji from Indian Express. Sir, you talked about China making first time a statement about NSG on our candidature and NSG membership. Given the fact that they were one of the few countries who opposed the nuclear deal exemption at the NSG, what does this mean? And secondly, what about the other three export control regimes, Wassenaar, Australia Group, and NDTV?
I think one, the NSG has a certain prominence among the four, which is why it was picked up. I'm not sure China is even a member of MTCR, so I don't think it makes sense discussing MTCR with them. That's my recollection. In terms of is it significant or not? The fact that there is a reference in the document and that this is an ongoing subject of discussion, I'm sure you can draw that conclusion for yourself.